Hi, my name is Niall Boylan. Of course, you know me from the radio station. I'm talking to people every single day, and you know what? They're sick of the government. I love this city. I love Ireland. I love the crack. I love the cave meal of Fáilte that it's offered us for thousands of years. But we need change. And over the last 4 years in particular, I've noticed those callers are getting angrier and very frustrated because they feel voiceless. They're listening to a government who are not listening to them. An opposition party who don't seem to oppose. They've ignored us on so many things, so many important issues. They've ignored us on mass immigration with a reckless immigration policy. They've ignored us on healthcare with waiting lists getting longer. There's 4,000 children in temporary accommodation as the homeless numbers rise and rise in this country. But what have they done about it? What have they actually done? They've made promises but done nothing. Our business communities are suffering with closures every single day caused by skyrocketing energy costs and a government that refuses to reduce the VAT rate back to 9% to help those businesses stay open. And many people say they don't feel safe in our city, with crime figures that seem to be getting worse every single day. And that's why I'm here. You can see the doll in the background. And remember, in that building in the doll in the background, very few of those people are actually listening to you. But some people are listening. Michael Collins, Michael Fitzmaurice, and Richard O'Donoghue, Independent Ireland. And that's why I've decided to run as a European MEP and be the real voice of Dublin for Independent Ireland, for honesty, integrity and real common sense. I'm not a politician. In fact, I'm not even part of the establishment. But I think that's what we really need. We need real change. And we need people to stand up and be counted and represent the people of Dublin. I'm a proud Dubliner. I'm a proud Irishman. I'm a good listener, and I'll speak honestly and openly for you, the people of Dublin and the people of Ireland. So please vote for me, Niall Boylan, on the 7th of June, and I'll be the real voice of Dublin and the real voice of Ireland in Europe. It is a very good afternoon. It's Niall Boylan with you for the next hour or so. By the way, thank you to everybody who made us feel so welcome yesterday. We were campaigning outside Croke Park. Thank you as well to Ungarda Síochána. They were very pleasant to us and very nice. Thank you very much indeed to everybody who was so happy, by the way, to take our flyers off us. One or two weren't too happy. But I've noticed, by the way, when you're campaigning and you're giving out flyers, there's a kind of apathy towards politics in general. And what happened was you'd hand somebody a flyer and they go, oh, go away from me, go at me. And then they'd read the flyer and they go, oh, Noel, you're your man on the radio, yeah. So there's this kind of idea that anybody who hands them a flyer is a bad person because they're involved in politics. I think we need to get rid of that because there are good people in this country who want to run for election. Try and listen to them all, okay? It's really important. We'll talk about the European elections a little bit later on, a bit more about that. But of course, it's been an interesting weekend as well for immigration. And our Justice Minister, according to the Irish Independent, has now pulled out of a conference she was due to attend in London amid deepening rows with the UK over migration. Minister McEntee, who was snubbed by her UK counterpart, James Cleverly, she was due to meet, by the way, in London today. He's not meeting her after all. The UK side cancelled the meeting at the last minute last night, saying there was a diary conflict. I find that hard to believe. Anyway, however, Minister McEntee is now no longer going to the conference in London at all. The Minister will meet with senior officials in Dublin today and regrets that she won't be in attendance at the British International, or Irish International, or Intergovernmental Conference, should I say, which will be attended by the Taoiseach, according to a spokesperson. Now, the Minister looks forward to meeting with the Home Secretary to be rescheduled very, very soon. Now, of course, you all know this is the kind of row over this piece of legislation that she wants to introduce, this emergency legislation, because there's a huge problem with the amount of people who are coming to Ireland from the United Kingdom. According to the government's own estimates, by the way, 80% of those who are coming here are coming from the United Kingdom. And the Minister said, from an Irish perspective, it is essential that we can return people back to the UK when appropriate. Over the last month, of course, she said she's been working on emergency legislation to allow us to commence the returns here. I also find that hard to believe that she's been working on it for the last month. I actually don't believe it. Now, it was an interesting piece today, by the way, by Thomas O'Reilly who is a correspondent, European correspondent for Eurocon Official and the Birkin, and also, by the way, syndicated with Grip Media. He says there have been between 700,000 and 1.2 million undocumented migrants in Britain. If only a fraction of these relocate to the Republic of Ireland, it is going to be devastating for our economy, for our accommodation services, for our Department of Immigration to actually deal with. It will be a complete and utter mess. Well, to talk about it a bit more, and I want to get your reaction, by the way, to the Minister's legislation. Do you trust the government to actually fix this problem? And also, by the way, if you're at any of the protests over the weekend, particularly the one in Newtown, Mount Kennedy, please give us a call. We want to get your reaction to that as well. So whatever it is you want to talk about, please WhatsApp us on 085 100 22 55. I want this to be your platform to get your opinion out. First of all, I want to go to John McGurk from Grip Media just to talk about, of course, this story at the moment. John, hi, how are you?
Good morning, Niall. How are you?
Good. John, I'm a little bit cynical, I'm going to be honest with you, with this new piece of legislation. And we spoke about this, and I really believe, and I know you put up a tweet about it last night, I really believe that the Minister is going to use this to get the EU Migration Pact over the line by suggesting, because as we know, the High Court has already said that, the United Kingdom is not a safe place. But according to the EU Migration Pact, we can send them to the United Kingdom, provided they give us a guarantee they will be sending them to a safe place, which they've now deemed it to be a safe place. So in other words, the Minister might say, look, I've got great legislation for you, lads and ladies and lads, but we have to be in the EU Migration Pact. We have to sign it before I can really go over the line on this one. Maybe I'm just being cynical.
No, I don't think you're being. I mean, there's a huge degree of cynicism to this. I mean, the first thing to say is, of course, the oldest trick in the Irish political book is if the government is in trouble, find some reason to have a row with the Brits, get everyone to put on the green jersey and reenact 1916. Mm-hmm. And there's an element of that happening here. All of a sudden, I saw the Taoiseach saying at the weekend that Ireland wasn't going to be dealing with another country's immigration problems. I mean, he's a great communicator. He can say it in a convincing way, but these aren't Britain's immigration problems. These are Ireland's immigration problems. When people are coming into your country, that's your immigration policy, blame. It's nobody else's.
Yeah.
The second thing is, I mean, there's an irony here, obviously, Niall, that the British, and I have a piece on this morning, seem to have made the Irish flagship immigration policy work for them. They're actually getting people to self-deport.
Well, Rishi Sunak is delighted, by the way. His words was, it proves it's working. What they're doing is working. It's a deterrent. Yeah.
It just goes to show that self-deportation can work for a country if it has an immigration policy where the alternative to self-deportation is something worse, like in this case, Rwanda. So, I mean, this is a case of British immigration policy working and Irish immigration policy not working. It's not a matter of the Brits screwing us, necessarily. But I think you're right about one thing, which is that there's very clearly an political effort underway here to do two things. First of all, to deflect blame for the current situation in towns like Newtown, Mount Kennedy and other places away from the Irish government and on to the old enemy. And second of all, to present everything the government is doing on immigration as a response to that, as a new hardline crackdown, including the European Union Migration Pact, which of course you and I discussed last week. Which is a very strange piece of legislation, European legislation, in that it would actually transfer the right.
Well, I can tell you now, if I was there for the last 5 years, and I hope I will be there for the next 5 years, I certainly wouldn't have voted for it, because I mean, everything that's in it we already could do ourselves. We don't need Europe to tell us how to do that. We should be implementing all those laws. But we're in a dangerous situation, John, when the High Court has already told us you can't send people back to the United Kingdom. Now, our only way out of this, i.e. is new legislation, or indeed, for us to sign some pact that we don't actually agree with.
Yes, I mean, technically now, for your listeners, no. What the Irish High Court said was that the process the minister had used to declare the UK a safe country was flawed. So this business of working on legislation for 5 weeks to fix this problem, that's a bit of a red herring, because she just needs to use the process she used with every other country to declare the UK a safe country to render that decision moot. So, I mean, this line, I've been working on this legislation for the last 5 weeks, as you correctly identified, Niall, that doesn't cut the mustard. I think they would have been perfectly content to leave things as they were until they woke up one morning and realised actually people are coming here in larger numbers.
But it's a kind of bizarre thing to state that the United Kingdom is not a safe country, when in fact we all know it is a safe country. It's only unsafe if you commit a crime or you're illegally in the country, whereby you'll be deported, which would be the normal procedure in most countries in the world. In other words, that's like saying, if you go to jail, like being in jail is not a safe place to be, but you shouldn't be in jail because you shouldn't have committed a crime in the first place. Do you understand what I'm saying?
But Niall, you and I are sort of ordinary human beings. We're not the kind of exalted souls who practice in the immigration courts or work in NGOs working on these areas who have decreed that the United Kingdom might not be a safe country because people living in the United Kingdom illegally have the risk of being deported to Rwanda. And that is the reason why they're saying it is no longer a safe country for a migrant if you might be sent to Rwanda if you live there. Therefore, it's no longer a safe place.
But there's almost a suggestion. There's almost a suggestion here by the humane people out there. Now, don't get me wrong. I think we all should, have humanity. But there's a suggestion by people that we're somehow punishing asylum seekers by sending them to Rwanda. Now, let's be clear about it. There's no compulsion to go to Rwanda. If you're an asylum seeker and you don't want to go to Rwanda, you just go home to wherever you came from. You know what I mean?
Well, that's exactly what's happening. That's exactly what's happening, isn't it? I mean, so when this policy was being debated in the UK, there was a lot of sturm and drang from actually both flanks of politics. The hard left obviously said it was hugely inhumane to send people to Rwanda. It's a landlocked country, third world country in Central Africa. You're a monster for sending people there. But actually on the right of UK politics, including a lot of people who are very strong views on immigration in the UK, said the Rwanda thing was a complete red herring. That they'd only send a couple of hundred people, that it was basically a put-up job to pretend you're doing something when you're not. And I think those people on the right missed the point, Niall, that the threat of being sent to Rwanda is enough to get people to do stuff by themselves. So what we're now seeing is people in the UK saying, as you say, they don't have to go to Rwanda if they don't want to, because they can come to Ireland instead.
Or go home.
Either one,
but so I'm looking at
a lot of them are clearly deciding that Ireland is nicer than home, so they're coming here.
I mean, this could be absolutely disastrous, because Thomas Riley points out this morning, who's the Eurocon Brussels correspondent, said there are between 700,000 and 1.2 million undocumented migrants in Britain. He said if only a fraction relocate in the Republic of Ireland, we're in serious trouble.
Yeah, and remember, it remains the policy of the Irish government. For all this kind of shift and noise and, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, it remains their policy that anybody who comes here has a right to apply for asylum and be put into the system. Now, they're talking about speeding that process up in some instances, but all of those people will still have to be processed. They'll still have to be accommodated. They'll still have a right to appeal. So, I mean, if you want to avoid the UK's Rwanda policy for a period of time, even if they speed it up to 2 months, I mean, you could have a lot of people coming here chancing their arm for a couple of months. And that's assuming we can return them. And of course, if we do return them to the UK, they can just come back and start the process all over again, because
that's the point of it, isn't it? I mean, so we send them off on a ferry back to England again. Sure, they just jump on the next boat or the next train back up to Scotland and back across into Northern Ireland and back down again. I think the only solution is that we have a deal with Stormont, whereby, similar to the Irish immigration system that we have, in Dublin Airport, if you're heading off to America on your holidays, that we have a deal struck with Northern Ireland that they, in other words, do all the checks and balances and everybody that comes in at the ports up in Belfast. I think that's probably the only way out of this.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you there, because I think first of all, I think there's problems with that policy, and secondly, I think there's a better one. The problem there is that the unionists are not going to agree to that. I mean, they're basically putting an internal border in the Irish Sea, which they fought long and hard against and divided their country into, as they would see it. But secondly, the other obvious solution, Niall, is that we just take away the incentive for people to come here. I mean, Denmark, the UK is not the only country to have this deal with Rwanda. Denmark has the same deal with Rwanda. It's also an EU country.
I'm sorry, there's a lot of wind there, John. It's kind of hard to hear you there at the moment. There's a bit of wind noise. Sorry.
Sorry, Niall. There's a hurricane blowing in. I hope that's better.
That's better.
I was going to say the other thing we could do is we could harmonise our policy with the UK in respect to Rwanda, because the UK is not the only European country to have that arrangement in place with the Rwandan government. Denmark, which also has it. If the Irish government were to say to people, we're going to copycat the UK's policy, we're going to do a deal with Rwanda, or indeed another similar country in Central Africa, that will take these migrants, then the incentive to come here is removed overnight, because we would have the same policy.
So why don't we? Well, what's stopping us with NGOs, obviously? But it's probably going to be your answer to this question. What's stopping us from taking that hard line when it comes to immigration? And by the way, people always say, "Oh, you're anti-immigration, Boylan." I'm not anti-immigration, nor are you, John. I'm well aware of that. I'm in favour of a fair immigration policy, that if people get rejected or they don't qualify to be an asylum seeker or those who seek international protection, that they should be returned. That's a fair immigration policy.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's really a matter for you. You're the politician, not me these days, as to what our policy will be moving forward. But I think amongst those who are already politicians, I mean, I think there's a big dollop of national self-image involved here, where we just wouldn't do anything like that. That's the thing the horrible British would do. We're too nice. send people to Rwanda.
Cade Míle Fáilte, Tiddly Idle.
There obviously would be a huge kick-up from the various NGOs in respect to this. I mean, for some reason, the Irish Times and immigration issues goes to the Immigrant Council before it goes to any resident of any town in Ireland for comment. But I think a lot of people would see the sense of it. I mean, if you've got people coming here from the UK to escape a policy because they think it's easier and that they won't be deported to Rwanda, and that's why they're coming here, the quickest way to nip that in the bud is to say, well, actually, you come here, you'll be deported to Rwanda as well. That stops the incentive for people to move. I mean, maybe this becomes France's problem, or Belgium's problem, or, I don't know, Iceland's problem. But, for the moment, we are still saying our immigration policy is much nicer than the UK's, and if you're in the UK and you can come here freely, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So all this talk about borders and putting fences up along the Cavan border or asking the unionists to accept passport controls at Belfast Airport, I mean, that doesn't make as much sense as simply doing what the English are doing and saying, actually, we'll do the same thing to you, so don't bother coming. Final
question for you, John. Minister for Justice, she's come under a lot of criticism over the last few weeks, and more so actually in the last week, particularly in the Oireachtas the other day with Michael McNamara. I mean, is she fit for the job, realistically? I mean, she just seems to make mistake after mistake. I mean, again, this meeting has been cancelled, obviously, or postponed with James Cleverly in the UK. I don't think he's interested in talking to her because they're happy to get rid of the problems of Ireland. So realistically, is she fit for the job?
Well, it's a big question, and I don't want to chicken out of it. But I also don't think it's fair to say whether she's got the intellectual capacity or the managerial resources. What I think is very clear is that her department is not being well run. I mean, when she goes in, if you look at that committee meeting last week where she was in face with Michael McNamara and she couldn't answer his questions, that would be one thing if the questions were a complete surprise out of left field. But he had raised them in an article in the Sunday Independent 3 days before that committee meeting. He had raised these very questions that he put to her. And yet none of her highly paid advisors, none of her civil servants had thought, he might ask this on Wednesday.
But he also requested that information 3 months ago as well, I believe.
Yeah. He did. So, I mean, they were aware this was an issue, and yet still neither she had asked, whether she didn't ask for the information, which clearly she didn't, and that none of her officials decided this might be worthwhile briefing her on it rather than making her look like an aegis. And she looked like an aegis.
She did look like an aegis, in fairness.
That raises very serious questions about her ability to manage the department and the department's ability to service any minister. And I think it is very clear that if she is capable of managing the department, then she is at minimum guilty of letting them away with murder. And if she's not letting them away with murder, then she's not capable of managing the department. It's one or the other. She's either not up to the job or she's not doing it right.
Well, listen, thank you very much indeed, and I appreciate you coming out to talk to us today. John McGurk, editor of Grip Media. You can catch up with all those stories, by the way, on Grip Media as usual. Want to go to Paul Trevaux if I can. Paul, hi, how are you?
Niall, how are you, sir?
Good. Paul, now the reason you're on, by the way, is not only to talk about what we've just been talking about for the last 10 minutes, because it is directly linked to the problem that we have. And I'm looking, sun sets on Irish staycation boom as domestic bookings dry up. Now, the story is, of course, that 50%, or it's down 50%, should I say, on Irish staycations. And I'm reading numerous stories about people saying, you know what, it's cheaper to go to Crete or it's cheaper to go to Spain for 3 days with Ryanair and a cheap holiday than head down to Killarney for a night. And that is a realistic problem for you and for business owners all over the country.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. I want to touch really, really quickly on something that John just said there about our Minister for Justice, which is a brilliant point, but just to drive it home even that little bit further. If I work in the Department of Justice, and by the way, this is for every department as to why you look at a politician who you might think is looking pretty stupid at the moment. If I work in that department, if I'm an advisor in that department, do I want to make her or him look stupid, or do I want to make me look stupid and jeopardize my job? So politicians in this country are going to have to realize very, very quickly, those that are handing them the information are handing it very, very poorly because they want the politician to look dumb because they come and go and they get to stay in their cushy job forever. So I know we all shout and scream at the politicians, but at some stage we're going to have to look at those who actually run the show and run the departments and scrutinise them. But all will be safe now because you will be MEP fairly soon and you'll be able to tackle that.
I will tackle that at a European level. I absolutely will, Paul.
Yeah.
Okay, but another thing I do want to tackle, by the way, is business, right? And particularly protecting small business, because small businesses are closing left, right and centre all over the country. Now, we've talked before about the VAT rate, which should be at 9%. We've talked before about spending money and incentivising people to come to Ireland. We need to do all of that as well. But if, there's no point encouraging people to come to Ireland if they're being ripped off. There's no point encouraging Irish people to stay at home maybe and, you know, have a weekend away if they're being ripped off. And they feel they're being ripped off, Paul.
Yeah, so the answer is they're not. The problem is, I mean, I handed a bill to a couple there that were in the restaurant there last week, and I said, look, it's probably about €11 more than what it should be, and that is because X, Y, Z. I knew the couple well, and they always pretty much had the same order. So I just said, listen, I would much rather charge the €11 less and not have to pay all the extra costs that I'm paying now at the moment. Because businesses, there's no way I'm going to rip somebody off. Because unlike a doctor, unlike a dentist, my prices are outside the window. So if somebody looks at that and goes, what? €32 for a steak? Crazy. If I was charging €50, there's no way they'd come in. So there's no way we're going to rip off our customers. And the majority of it, obviously, in every trade, in every business, in every walk of life, some people do take the proverbial. But most businesses have had to increase their costs because, very, very simple. Here's a classic example. My employer's RSI for the month of April in my direct debit that went out last week was €11 short of €4,000. So that people understand what I'm saying, I pay the government €4,000 in the month of April to hire people, to keep them off the dole. Most people don't realize that. We are taxed to hire people. We are taxed to pay people. And my amount, and I'm only a small guy, small business. Well, some people are laughing, texting me, you're not that small. But I'm talking about this. I'm only a small guy in the world of business. That was my tax bill for the month of April. €4,000.
What I was thinking, and I thought about this because I was in business myself. I employed people many years ago. I had two businesses actually, and I always thought that it should be based on your turnover, your employer's PRSI. So if you have a lower turnover, you should have to pay less of a percentage of an employer's PRSI because it doesn't make any sense. And the government should be in there because the bottom line is if you don't employ people, as you rightly said, they'll be on the dole, and the government will be paying the whole amount to them, not just the employer's PRSI or the amount you're paying in that. The VAT is another problem. The cost of energy, which indeed is something, again, that I want to look at and want to deal with as well. It should have been capped a long time ago. Energy needs to be capped, and it needs to certainly be subsidised by the state, particularly when it comes to small businesses. The other problem you have, Paul, and the main problem, and that's why I'm talking to you today about it as well, is people don't have anywhere to go because we're seeing a huge proportion of hotel rooms being taken up currently with asylum seekers, refugees, people seeking international protection, people from Ukraine. We're seeing hotels, so there's no footfall anymore. And another thing is, and somebody said to me the other day, by the way, and I don't blame them, I'm not going to disagree with them. They said, you know, I'm going away to Cork or I'm going away to Galway, and the hotel says to me, oh yeah, we have two or three rooms to spare, but now just letting you know, we have refugees in the hotel. Most people don't want to go to a hotel full of refugees. No disrespect to them, but that's not what they plan for their holidays.
No, you're 100% correct. Never apologise for speaking the truth. The problem with this government is what you explained in the costs that are involved in running our business. For the government to change that, incredibly, that means that they must stand up for the small individual, self-employed, rural family business, and do they stand up for the big multis? We're going, but we don't mind if employers' RSI go up. We don't mind if all these kind of costs go up because we can just ride the crest because we're a multinational. So what you're describing there is why aren't they doing it? It's because it would mean for once the government would actually have to stand up for the people of the country. The reason why this country is such a mess is because successive governments have turned their very backs on the people of this country. You've Simon Harris going, I've got your back. No, you actually meant to say, I've turned my back on you guys because that's what they've done. The last thing I want to be doing is tweeting all kinds of rows and arguments and moaning about the government and all that. I used to tweet pictures of food. I want to be doing that. But we were promised an ICOB grant, an increased cost of business grant. Nobody is getting it. Initially, when they discussed the pre-budget, they said it would be paid automatically into small businesses' account in mid-January of 2024. Then they said at the budget, it'll be paid in the first quarter of the year. Don't worry, you don't need to apply because county councils all around the country have your details from COVID. It is now almost the second month of quarter two and nothing. We still haven't been paid. And I tweeted out last week.
And on top of that, of course, sorry for interrupting, on top of that, of course, you've got coming up at the end of May, all that VAT that was warehoused going back 3 years ago, and they now all have to come to some sort of agreement to pay that back. That should be all waived, particularly on businesses that have a smaller turnover at this stage. But getting back to the point of today's conversation in relation to immigration, which is a really important part of this, Paul, for small businesses around the country, particularly in rural Ireland, small villages. They're being decimated by the fact that there's no tourism. There's no footfall. There's no staycations. 50% down on staycations. There's no people travelling off, for the, the couple for the 2 days, wandering around the town, buying a few bits and pieces and eating in your restaurant, for example. That's not happening anymore. That's certainly not to the extent it was.
Yeah, no, look, as you know, I've been very vocal over the last few years, much to the pain in the whole of this current government, but I have been saying what you are doing is going to result in XYZ, which is decimation of tourism, which is closures of a huge amount of family-run businesses, which is exactly what's happening. I'm not going to lie, myself and my brother, we have not paid ourselves, and I know there are hundreds, if not thousands of people listening in the same boat that are small self-employed. We have not paid ourselves 5 out of the last 6 months in running our restaurant, because I need the money there, and I'm just hoping that we're going to have a good season that will bring that back around. But that is
the only way you're going to have a good season is if we start filling the hotels with tourists and not refugees.
And which we won't, because contracts are still signed and still done up until the end of this year, if not early of next year. So that's not going to happen. So what you're going to see, and this is a horrible thing to say, but let's just say there's 2 restaurants in the town, me and the guy across the road from me. The only way one of us gets better is if the other closes his doors. And that's what's going to happen. And that's the government ultimately know that. You've got Michael McGrath turning around saying, we'll only help small businesses that we deem viable. Well, I'll tell you what, Michael McGrath, if you're listening, or hopefully one of your advisors is listening, the reason why so many businesses are not viable is because of the ridiculous policies you and your government have implemented over the last 10 years. That's why we're not viable. You increase VAT. You increase the energy. And when I say increase, you've done nothing to combat it. You've increased employers' RSI. You've increased minimum wage. The cost of doing business. So to put it into context, if the guy who delivers me a breast of chicken from 2 miles away all of a sudden has to pay an extra 15, 20 cents onto the price of his litre, all of a sudden my breast of chicken has gone up 10p because he has to pay extra for it. And that's how it works. So every single day, if not every single week, I'm getting an email from suppliers. This has gone up. Why? Well, we didn't have much rain over here, and that's caused that to go up. Or we had too much rain, and that's caused that to go up. The energy's gone up. The electricity's gone up. The fuel. Eamon Ryan is going to tackle the world's climate issue.
Eamon Ryan, let's be clear about this. Eamon Ryan and the Green Party shouldn't be allowed anywhere near Leinster House. Or actually, we should actually set up an exclusion zone for the Green Party around Leinster House.
I've thought long and hard about what we should do with the Green Party.
Let's not refer to violence if we can.
No. I'm the last person who would ever resort to violence. If you have to resort to that, you're clearly not intelligent enough to debate these people. Just send them into a room and just pretend. Let them think that they're all
part of the damage that's been done. They're part of the damage that's been done to your business. When we look at climate policy and agriculture, for example, that has a massive effect on the cost price for you, for your steak and everything else. The climate policy, when we talk about the increased rates of, taxes, carbon taxes on energy, et cetera, all this is having a huge effect. I filled up my car there yesterday and it was like 182 or 183. We're back up to 183 a litre. Myself and Karen were only chatting about the fact that I remember the days when you didn't even look at the fuel to see how much it was. You didn't bother looking because it was always around between 120 and 130. You didn't bother looking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now you're kind of looking at it all the time. We were lucky. Well, when I say we were lucky, we kind of smiled a bit when it went back down to 150 there during the year. But now we're back up at 180 and it's looking like it's going to go over the €2 mark in the next 2 or 3 weeks. That's ridiculous. A lot of that's to do with Green Party policies, by the way, around the world, not just here in Ireland. Paul, I wish you well in your business. I really want to be there, by the way, for all the small business owners of Ireland. Please write to me and let me know how I can make it better. I've been talking to Paul, by the way, behind the scenes as well. Paul has a 5-point plan that he wants to implement, and I agree with every single part of it, including the reduction of the VAT rate, etc., and everything else that he spoke about today for small businesses. Paul, I appreciate you coming on the air. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks a million. Appreciate that.
Let me go to Michelle Smith. Michelle, hi, how are you?
Hi, Niall. How are things?
Good. Michelle, by the way, just reminding people, Michelle Smith is from Midlands Northwest and she's a candidate for MEP in the Midlands Northwest region, so please do give her your vote. Michelle, now, I mean, you've seen Helen McEntee's proposed legislation, she said she's going to change legislation. Do you trust the government to actually do anything to fix this crisis?
No, absolutely not. I don't trust them wholeheartedly, 100%. I think they're all coming out now with these false promises, as I said, because it's coming up to elections and nothing else. And they've seen the Red Sea poll and they know they're losing serious respect and trust of everybody across Ireland. And the fact that the illegal immigrants are coming across the border in such a strong amount of numbers, like 80%.
80%, yeah.
And we found out yesterday then, I don't know if you've seen this, that Michelle O'Neill put up and said that she has had zero communication from the Minister of Justice regarding the 80%. So it's all well and good to go on press and say, well, we do know that 80% are coming across, and yet no one in the Department of Justice can lift the phone and go, oh, hello, can I speak to someone, please, about the 80% coming over the border?
Yeah, can we have a chat about it? What can we do about it? How can we fix this? Yeah.
There's no communication, and that's for that to be released, by Michelle O'Neill there the other day. And I'm not plugging Sinn Féin at all. I found out that one of their MEPs actually abstained from votes for this EU Migration Pact. Out of the 13 MEPs, 11 of them showed up, and Chris McManus abstained from vital parts of this, and he was against the resettling plan. I think this whole thing needs to be brought back. Everybody.
Oh, well, I mean, we all know what happened. I mean, 3 weeks ago, we had a bunch of woke MEPs that voted for this. This is not, and this is what's terrible when we talk about representation. They're representing the Irish people. They're not stupid. They have seen the polls over the last 6 or 7 months, 75%, 85%, 90%, whatever it is, of people saying, and these are Red Sea and Amora polls, people saying we've let too many people into the country. And yet they go over and vote for a pact that essentially guarantees to continue the same problem for the next 10 or 20 years. So they're not listening to the people at all.
No. I said this, I done a debate, my first ever debate I done against Fianna Fáil candidate and Labour candidate in Galway Bay FM. And Niall, he just basically shouted over me saying, well, what have you been elected to? And come back to me when you're elected. And then I said about the EU Migration Pact, it's one of the biggest bills to have passed in Europe. And your MEPs voted for this. They voted for it in the Dáil as well. And he goes, but I'm going out and I'm speaking up and I'm educating people, saying enough is enough and I'm bringing this back. And I have a vital point to him. What is the point in being in the Seanad or an MEP for Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael or the Greens or Sinn Féin or any if your whole party won't listen to you and if you're making no impact because you're under a party whip? There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And there's no point in going on air and saying, well, I'm speaking up against this and then trying to completely blame Roderick O'Gorman on the whole thing. It's a coalition. Mm-hmm. But this has happened at EU level. There was a referendum that was meant to happen in this country and Darragh O'Brien, TD, it should happen in 2023 and that's the right of housing. Like Article 8 of the European Convention of Human Rights states, everyone has the right to respect for his private and family life, his home, his correspondence. And they've told the charities going back to this, we're going to make this bill happen. And yet 70% now of homeless people in this country, and it's rising, are renters. The people who are affected by the pyrite and the mica, a lot of them have put monies into homes and mortgages and the government has turned their backs on them. Okay,
just Michelle, because I have a lot of I want to get to Madeline and Gladys and everybody else is waiting patiently there, but just in relation to what Helen McEntee has said, now she has postponed her meeting because James Cleverly obviously doesn't want to meet her. His name is suitable, clever, because I can tell you now, the British are delighted. The Rwanda effect, as they're calling it, is essentially encouraging everybody. The British might as well be handing them plane tickets and ferry tickets to come to Ireland at this stage because they're so happy about this, because they believe it's now a deterrent to send people to Ireland. John McGurk makes a good point. Maybe we should do the same thing. Maybe we should bring in legislation whereby people who come here illegally and don't qualify as an asylum seeker should also be sent to Rwanda, similar to Denmark.
I done TikTok yesterday because I was rightly peed off on the road because they're saying about fast tracking now the applications and this whole propaganda. Oh, we're doing this and we're doing that. Like, this isn't Helen McEntee's fight from the start. I found an article from Oireachtas.ie where Simon Harris was drilled on this when he was Minister for Justice, when the Dublin 3 regulation was not being implemented. And we know that only 3 people were sent back last year. And I stated that back in January when I was making people aware that this policy is here. If it was implemented, it would work. And even Simon Harris back to last year stating, it's litigation possible costs and it's possible costs of taxpayer. But when they're knocking doors and they're saying, well, everyone we don't take in now is €20,000, But everyone we do take in is minimum 38,000.
Well, here's the thing. I know that people, who are talking about being, humane about this, and we have to be humane as well, okay? But they're saying Rwanda's not the right thing to do. But, the British have admitted very few people are actually going to get sent to Rwanda, because all it does is, the Rwanda effect is it discourages people from entering the country legally in the first place, because they think, well, if I don't qualify here, I'm going back to Rwanda. Or if your application fails, you'll self-deport yourself to another country because you don't want to go to Rwanda. So that's really the effect it's having, and that's what the British want. They don't particularly want to send people to Rwanda because that costs money.
Yeah, exactly. But look, it's not Ireland's responsibility to fix things. We're being judged here.
Well, here's the thing. Myself and John were talking about this. People say, look, it's not our responsibility to pick up the tab for Britain, right? But it essentially is, because we have a responsibility to our own borders. So if they're coming over here, they're not Britain's responsibility anymore. They're ours. And we need to deal with that.
And look, I grew up in the north, and I know through the troubles what it's like to go through a border. But surely we can work together collectively, north and south,
that's absolutely what we should be doing.
And put something down. I know what it's like.
It would be quite easy to stop people getting off planes, at Belfast International Airport or George Best Airport.
Even if the guards stand there, I know, the Good Friday Agreement is there, it's working, there's a huge argument against it, but surely for a short period of time, even people, I know cars, you're not going to fit many illegal immigrants into a car, but for buses coming down or lorries, a quick scan and process in the lane, the customs.
Well, what would be the harm in asking people for, I'm assuming they do it anyway. What's the harm in asking people for their passports when they get off a boat in Belfast or off a plane? If they don't have passports and documentation, they should be just sent back to mainland Britain again.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
and I know people say, well, you shouldn't need your passport, it's a free travel area. But hey, they always ask for the passports anyway.
Always.
Yeah. Oh, Michelle, I'm sorry, I'm running out of time rapidly. Michelle Smith, listen, Michelle is a candidate, as said, for the European Parliament for Midlands and North West. She's running an election on the 7th of June. Thank you very much indeed, Michelle. Let me just go to Madeline. Oh, where's my button's not working there. Hold on a second, Madeline. I get you on there now. As soon as my buttons start working, they should start working any minute. By the way, if you want to send us a text or WhatsApp, you can. The number, as usual, is 085 100 22 55. That's 085 100 22 55. Madeline, sorry about that.
You're grand. How are you?
I'm good, Madeline. Madeline, do you trust the government to actually deal with this crisis? They say they're going to deal with it by bringing in emergency legislation.
No, don't trust them, and I don't think the country should trust them after the whole grit redacted statements on the last referendum. I think that speaks for itself. Can I answer the question that you asked John McGurk earlier about Helen, whether she's incompetent or not? She definitely is. And the people of Ireland need to know that Brussels is the tail that's wagging the dog here. We're completely under attack. Native white Christian populations are definitely being replaced at the behest of corrupt and elitist global governments. And there's no other way of looking at that. This whole thing with the people coming down from the north, here's the funny thing, England are not obliged to take any of these people back because they arrived illegally in Britain in the first place. So I think now, looking at stuff this morning, the politicians and the media are having a great laugh at our expense now this morning, having watched our government bask in their own moral superiority over the last couple of years, talking about how we owed everybody else, bar the Irish. So I think it's not, won't come back to bite them on the ass, but it's certainly going to eat the ass off every Irish citizen.
We seem to be suggesting, looking at the Irish government, they're kind of blaming Britain for this, right? And I find this incredible. This is not Britain's fault. I mean, Britain are putting in steps to deal with the problem. We should be doing the same, but we're not. We haven't been doing it for 2 years. And by the way, anybody who even suggested this, actually only about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I said on this show quite loudly and proudly, if the legislation isn't there to deal with it, bring it in. And I was told, you can't just bring in legislation like that. I said, yes, you could. You did it during COVID overnight. This is an emergency. Yeah. Bring it in tomorrow.
And we did it. We did agree on that. No, this is a very clever move by the British now, because this is the easiest place for them all to arrive. And I think, and it would answer our Gardaí better to be out protecting our borders rather than attacking people who are mothers, grandmothers, grandfathers and children who are trying to peacefully protest to try and take back our country and our sovereignty. It would answer them better to be the real criminals here.
And how do we go about that, Madeleine? Because if we've got 80% of people coming in from the United Kingdom, the argument is, should you stop them at the border? Because then you're putting a border on the Irish Sea. Do you have a man standing out in the middle of the road in Newry on the M1 with his hand up saying, stop, I want to check your vehicle? I mean, you can't really go back to that because that's kind of reminiscent of the troubles of the 1970s, isn't it? So how do we do that?
Well, for a start, we're an island and a very tiny island surrounded by water. We would be a very easy country to water border control. I see last week there had friends coming in from Germany. I think it was Frankfurt. Nobody was allowed off that plane without showing their passport. But interestingly enough, then about Germany, I'm reading that German children now are converting to Islam to try and fit in. And it's looking like the populations of most Western capital cities now the natives now are outnumbered by Islam. Mm-hmm. And that's very, very worrying. That is very worrying. So I know everybody that protests, I've peacefully protested for the last 4 years. And I think it's awful that we have been made feel like criminals and we've been all this name calling, when in actual fact all the ordinary Irish people just want to protect their homes.
But hang on, but everything you said, or that I might have said, or people who have been labelled right-wing, inverted commas, said going back a year and a half ago, the government are now saying, oh, we're going to do those things. So does that mean the government are now right-wing as well because they're saying they're going to do them? Or is it really the fact that they're just pretending they're going to do them and they're actually going to not do it at all? They come up with some excuse as to why they can't do it.
I said this to you a few weeks ago, and I don't think they actually have. I think they're a very incompetent group of people, And just looking ahead at what we're looking at, I mean, the country resembles, I said to you last week, post-apocalyptic. It's filthy dirty. There's no social cohesion. There's no building of communities. Our traditional values are being stripped. This is what we're heading towards if we don't stand up and take a stand. And I think all around Europe, people are starting to stand up, wake up and listen. So again,
there was the protest, of course, in Newtown, Mount Kennedy yesterday was a great turnout, a lovely peaceful protest, and that's what we need. And I know when we look in the past, for example, in relation to the water protest and the income tax protests in the past, those kind of protests work when you get a lot of people. But unfortunately, what's happened is there's an apathy at the moment that people go on social media and they feel, oh, I've done my bit. There you go. I'm on social media now. I've put up that I don't like this or I don't like that. And they don't feel they need to attend the protests. Now, of course, no. By the way, people have asked me, by the way, Noel, what are you going to do? What I've been doing is giving people a platform for 20 years. That's what I've been doing before most of the protesters were even born, probably. I've been giving people a platform. And I do it here on a regular basis on the podcast as well for people to come on. And that platform is worth just as much because you're reaching just as many people, if not more.
Oh, without a doubt, and I support that 100%. But if you look back to the 70s and 80s, every little bit of legislation that was changed here was through people power. That last referendum was happened by people power. People have to just get up off their backsides and get out and protest. Nobody wants what this government is offering us. They're destroying this country, absolutely. And it looks like conspiracy theorists have been right all along. And I told you, I heard this about globalist, elitist governments back in 2014, which is 10 years ago, in Sicily. And my God, all the jigsaw pieces are all falling in together right now.
Yeah. Well, listen, Madeleine, thank you very much indeed. And don't forget, Madeleine, I did promise you that I will come out with you because I know you want to go locally campaign in the area, and I will come out and I will walk door to door.
I'm not holding to that. You're coming out with me. I look forward to that. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, I'll walk door to door with you. Okay, listen.
I'll hold you to that now.
Thank you very much indeed, Madeleine. We'll be in touch very soon. All right, cheers. Bye-bye. Let me go to, stay there, please. No, let me go to Gladys. Gladys, hi. How are you doing?
Hi, not too bad. Sorry, okay. I've just been listening to everybody and agreeing with mostly what people are saying. But just now, just a thought occurred to me that Ireland is no longer a safe country. My daughters don't feel safe. I don't feel safe.
Why? Can you explain to people? Because some people don't get that or don't understand that. Explain to people this idea of why people now don't feel safe. Well, obviously crime is on the rise. We've seen that. Mind you, we have a rising population. But explain to people that feeling of, and we've heard it from the families, the parents of people, say for example in Newtown, Mount Kennedy over the weekend, or Rosscray, or whatever it happens to be, that we don't feel safe. What is that feeling, Gladys?
Well, I would just think that what my eldest daughter said to me a couple of weeks ago, and I just want to premise this by saying that, if I get, people being called bigots and you don't want this and you're racist and whatever the case may be, this is an absolute untruth. This is, and also the other side of that coin, and I get really annoyed about it, is that are white people the only people allowed to be called racist? Because I've lived in a good few countries all over the world, and I've come across complete and utter racists of colour.
Yes.
So, this is so annoying that because I would have a concern for the safety of my daughters and my grandchildren, that I somehow then I'm a racist. But to answer your question, when I was really taken aback when my daughter said, even wandering around when she was pregnant on her first child, she felt fine, But she said now, and having to go into work into town, it's a sense of menace. It's a sense of, I just can't wait to get out. Can't wait to get out. And even though I live in a nice area, there is an influx of men on their own, wandering around, just walking around. And I'm not pointing a finger and saying they're going to do something. Or it's a sense that as a woman, you're always checking yourself anyway. Mm-hmm. And it just has heightened up to, she does not want to walk. They do not want to walk on their own, which, especially my eldest daughter loved going for a walk, giving her headspace, being out, and she won't do it any longer alone. That is really scary, Like that's really,
I can't deny the way people feel, and I completely accept that, and I can't deny the way people feel, and a lot of people have said that to me. And as much as I may not have a complete understanding of it, I can't deny that feeling that people have. And I think apart from anything else, I mean, when people talk about, you're right, and people say, it must be about the colour of somebody's skin. I don't think it's anything to do with the colour of somebody's skin. I think it's more about culture. It's cultural more than anything else.
It's a cultural thing, yes. And it's also when you've got gangs of, of men, and I mean, look at the reports are out there, the statistics are out there, sort of thing. If you mix cultures that don't really mix, and I know this for an absolute fact because I lived in cultures that would be alien to me, and they did not want to mix, right? In case we were infidels, non-believers, right? And that was okay. That was the rules of their country, and I abided by those rules. And now, first thing, if you say anything, those cultures don't mix, and that's just the truth. Do you know what I mean? It's a different way of living and whatever. Mm-hmm. But what really, really bothers me is that I wanted to come back to live. Now, I'll just say this. The Irish went everywhere. This is true. I went everywhere. I also worked everywhere. I never, ever went to any government looking for in any country I lived in. We went to work. And when we went to emigrate to Australia, we had to have TB checks, we had to have medical checks, all at our own expense to get a visa. And we also needed jobs they needed in Australia.
Of course, you had to be sponsored to go there in the first place.
And I totally accepted that.
Well, what's the other thing they get you to do in Australia? Work in the mines.
The racist the Australians are.
Yeah.
I totally accept it.
Okay, but just very quickly, Gladys, because I have a lot of people to get to. I need to get to Nuala, Jackie and John here in a second. But in relation to what the Minister has promised, that she said she's going to bring in emergency legislation to deal with the problem that we're going to have probably over the next 6 or 7 weeks, which is the Rwanda effect, which is going to see a huge influx of people, who are failed asylum seekers from the United Kingdom coming to Ireland. Do you trust the Minister will actually be able to do that?
No. 100% no. 100% no. It's not going to happen. The influx, as you say, is going to happen, and then it's absolutely a mess to try to untangle that mess.
I'm looking at one headline says, Rwanda effect potentially setting an asylum time bomb for the Republic of Ireland.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, I would agree with John McCurk about, sort of thing, that's what we need to do as a deterrent, because once they're in, we don't know, so it's just...
Well, we seem to have problems getting people out of the country once they come in, whether they're somebody who would be acceptable as an asylum seeker and should be welcomed, or whether they're somebody who's not. We seem to have a problem getting rid of people because people just don't want to leave.
Serious criminals. Convicted criminals, to get them out has been rare. So can you imagine just all of these people that have no documentation, no nothing? Where in God's name, sort of thing, would that be allowed to happen?
Well, the first duty of any government, by the way, is to protect its country's borders. Listen, Gladys, thank you very much indeed. Appreciate you coming on the show. Let me go to John. John, hi, how are you?
Hi, how's the candidacy going?
It's going very well, John. I had blisters on my feet yesterday, mind you. Can I just point in? I was walking around Clonliff Road and Jones's Road and all around Crow Park. And
well, I got good news here. It gets tougher.
Yeah, I'm going to invest in a better pair of shoes, I think, John.
Because the one thing you will find, and possibly I found out that, look, I mean, it's not just door to door, because once you engage with a person, you could be 20 minutes in one door, and when that person is genuine, you have to give everyone the time.
Absolutely.
That's the one thing I found.
Yeah, well, it was interesting yesterday, and I have to say, as much as we were handling the people on the street more or less yesterday, there was about 7 or 8 of us, some great volunteers helping me as well. Well done to them all. Thank you very much, by the way, to everybody who's supporting me or wants to support me.
And I don't know you're getting this as well or not, but I'm getting it on the doors now going around. And the whole thing is that the main parties are getting people to put the leaflets in the doors, but even the local councils, which normally you couldn't keep away from your house, they're not coming knocking on the doors. They're scared of their life.
But you know the problem I found yesterday? You go to hand a leaflet to somebody and you get the odd person go off, right? And they're telling you to get lost or get away from them, right? And then they take the leaflet off you and they look at it and they go, "Oh, no, sorry, I didn't know it was yourself. Sorry, I thought it was one of the part." So, you know what I mean? Well, so this is that people have a hatred of politicians, just in general.
There was a woman told me the other day, she said, if I was feeling fraud canvassing at her door, or if I was feeling engaged, she said, "You're a lucky man." I says, "Why?" Because I would have broke the sweet brush off your head.
God. Well, John, getting back to the government, I don't have much time. I have to go to loads of people here, Nuala and Jackie as well.
Basically, this meeting that was organised, a supposed meeting.
Postponed meeting now, postponed.
Yeah, I believe that the British government had no intention of meeting her. I watched Richie Sunak on Sky News last night, and he's epipleptic. He's delighted because he's using now what's happening here. He said, "My policies are working as regards Rwanda. They're fleeing from here now and they're going to Ireland."
That was the plan. That was the plan. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, and I've said this already, although it might seem inhumane to send people to Rwanda, that was never really the plan. The plan was just the threat. So the threat was enough to get people to either go home to their own country or, because this idea that we're kind of grabbing people, arresting them and sending them off to Rwanda in the United Kingdom, that's not what's happening. People are being told, you failed asylum, you've 2 choices, you deport yourself or you're going to Rwanda. So they can go home if they want to, but they're not, they're coming here instead.
What you need at the moment, you need people up at the ferries and the airports in the north, and you need to ask you for your documents. If you're not allowed in because you're not allowed to.
Yeah, but I mentioned that to John McGurk and he reckoned the union is to go mad if you started that carry on.
Well, they can go mad away.
But look, they ask for passports anyway. In Belfast Airport and in George Best Airport and at the docks, they ask for, or the ports, should I say, they ask for passports anyway.
I'm going to say something now which I'm getting umpteen times from people back now, right? At the moment, it's not official, right? But the Irish government now are at war with its own people. And the reason is they're pursuing their policies. They don't care about what they're doing to small communities, medium-sized communities, larger communities. And the guards have picked a side. They have broke their oath of impartiality, guards of the peace. They are now battering Irish people. We are now back in the territory of 1969 when the civil rights marchers with Bernadette Devlin came on the streets of Derry and they were battered off the street. It's history repeating itself again and it won't be tolerated.
John, thank you very much indeed for that. Appreciate it. Let me just go to Jackie. Hi, Jackie. How are you doing?
I have to agree with John, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. History is repeating itself. We're back at square one again. And I know I've tweeted this many a time that my grandparents must be turning in the grave because they fought for our freedom. They were part of that. So yeah, I agree with that completely. It's pure and utter madness, and the whole Rwanda thing as well. It's right now the Irish government have something to blame, and I know you're going to get a certain amount of this because people are going, well, no, don't want to go out to there, so we'll go to Ireland. But it's been happening anyway without that threat. So now to have this as a kind of scapegoat in a way as well. So
but I mean, if we think problems are bad now, when we're looking at rural towns being devastated all over Ireland and people having to stand up for their rights on a weekly basis and protest and walk up and down the roads because the government are not listening to them. If you think that's bad now, you wait and see the tsunami that's going to happen over the next 6 or 7 weeks. And by the way, we had Nigel Farage on the air going back about 4 months ago, and his famous words were, when I said to him, what advice would you give the Irish government? And he said, well, if the Irish government think they have it bad now, you ain't seen nothing yet. And he was 100% on the money.
And I'm just going to go back to Paul, what Paul was saying, you know, in relation to just his business and restaurants around the country. As you know, I'm in the music industry, and we are now seeing the effects of the hotels, the close down of certain hotels, the large percentage of Ukrainians or whatever that are in certain hotels. So our business is being closed down bit by bit as well.
But I said to Paul there, Jackie, that a hotel owner was saying to me a while ago about, you know, not their whole hotel isn't full of refugees, but almost, but they still have, you know, 5 or 6 rooms available on a regular basis. And he said, no one will take them. I said, are you surprised? I said, if I'm going away, or if you're going away with your wife or your family, and the hotel owner says to you, listen, we've 3 or 4 rooms spare, yeah, but the rest of the hotel is full of refugees, are you okay with that? No, most people wouldn't be okay with that. That's not what you're paying for.
And the rooms would be 2 or 3 times the cost of...
Yes.
If it wasn't that. Now, the other thing is, I watched a great series on Netflix last night, and I'm just curious if you've seen it, called Stateless.
I haven't seen it, no.
No, it's very well worth watching, because, look, there's always different sides to this, and I do know there is genuine people that are fleeing.
Yes, absolutely. Of course, yeah.
And this series kind of goes through this because it's got to do with the Australian immigration issue. So I can see both sides, but I see a lot more of the other side, which is just the whole thing is about economics. It's all about being financially, this country is better to be here because we have more handouts.
But mind you, migration, we were talking to Breitbart News there about 2 weeks ago, and he was explaining the economics of migration, and migration or immigration into Ireland, be it illegal or otherwise, is worth a huge amount of money. And there are a lot of people in this country benefiting and profiting greatly from immigration.
Yeah, and it is the gravy train. And just one other thing, because I know you're caught up. I was speaking to someone yesterday who kind of looks at the main media, would be not so much watching or listening to yourself or others, or like Gript or whatever, and they're saying, oh my God, the scumbags that are down in Newtown and in Ballina and all this, and I'm going, you really don't know what's going on. You're listening to a certain viewpoint, which is actually is wrong, and is there's a whole load.
But why don't the media have these I've been having these conversations for 20 years, by the way, or 30 years, you know, and more so obviously in the last 4 or 5 years. But why are other media not having these conversations? There's nothing stopping them having them on the radio. They just don't have them, generally speaking. Why is that? Why are people like you not allowed to come on the air and give your opinion on the Joe Duffy show, for example, or something like that?
Yeah, because I think I know it might go back a lot longer, but I think COVID really nailed it, because suddenly the government were handing out all this money to stations what got to do with advertising.
Oh, I remember, yeah. I was working in a radio station at the time, yeah.
So there was a lot of money made. And there is still
to be fair, there wasn't money being made by radio stations. Well, the independent sector I can only vouch for, not RTE, obviously. But the independent sector lost a lot of money during COVID-19. Yes, they were given grants by the government, by the Broadcasting Authority, to try to get them to survive, because they lost all their advertising, because everywhere was closed. So they didn't make money, Jackie. Now, I didn't necessarily agree always with the way the money was given and the kind of, we'll give you this money if you do X, Y, Z or whatever. I didn't agree with that, generally speaking, but they had to get money from somewhere. Otherwise, they were going to close down. Yeah, I had to take a pay cut. I took a massive pay cut at the time. You know what I mean? Yeah,
but then did the guys that are above you take a pay cut as well?
Well, they did, actually, in fairness. I think they did. Well, I hope they did. I hope they did. But as I said, the only point I was making is, I know the Broadcasting Authority gave out thousands to radio stations, independent radio at the time, but they had to. They were going to close down if they didn't.
Yeah, but the government were still paying for advertising.
Oh, absolutely.
Get your vaccine, put on your mask.
Oh, yeah.
All that stuff was all paid for.
Oh, of course it was. And the 1 minute ads that you heard, we're now in phase 4, stay inside your home, all that kind of, that was all paid for. You are right, but that was the only advertising we had.
Yeah, but it was, so are the stations afraid, because there's still certain grants and certain things that the government are giving them that they're afraid to say.
Yeah, you are. I do think you do have a really good point. And, for example, at that time, if a radio station was being paid by the government, they would be almost afraid to go against the narrative. Yeah, because of fear that they wouldn't be given the money anymore. I get you. No, absolutely.
And as regards Helen McEntee, Helen McEntee might have, she probably has a great heart and went into that job to do something to make things right or make things better. But you have to ask again about the advisors and the NGOs and the amount of control that's there, and the fact a lot of the ministers don't get the proper information. And they really do not know everything that goes on. They rely on their advisors and their department officials to get...
Well, unfortunately, it seems, Jackie, judging by the performance of the Minister today in the Oireachtas, she's not delegating the tasks very well, is she? Clearly.
Well, the information isn't being passed on to her, or she should be asking questions there.
But she should, well, as John McGurk rightly said, whether it's been passed on to her or not, she knew those questions were going to come up. She should have asked for the information. That's her job. Anyway, Jackie, sorry, I'm running out of time rapidly here. I need to go to people as quickly as I can. Nuala, hi, how are you? Thank you, Jackie.
I'm good now.
Good.
Well, I think the problem really is started in about 2001 with the invasion of Iraq. Because before that, it would be only an odd Russian or an odd, gymnast or ballerina or something like that that would... would be looking for asylum way back, And then all of a sudden, after the war in Iraq, and then they go into Afghanistan and Syria and then Libya, and they have destabilized all these countries because you never had that big flow of people coming before. Like, all these wars have caused about 36 million people to be displaced. It's kind of crazy, and we're not, and they pushed NATO up against the walls of Russia. They were determined, the US and NATO were determined to go into push NATO on Ukraine. And all this, and we're the ones that have to take the pain. Where these countries, if you kick a hornet's nest, you should be the ones to take them. And we never caused any war. We never colonised anybody.
But the top countries of origin at the moment for asylum seekers and people seeking international protection in Ireland is Georgia, Algeria and Somalia. Now, the last time I checked, by the way, there was no war in Algeria or certainly in Georgia anyway, for certain. But Nuala, in relation to what we're talking about at the moment, the Minister said she's going to bring in legislation to make sure that people who fail the asylum process, particularly from the United Kingdom, are sent straight back to the United Kingdom. Do you believe she'll do that? Or is she capable of doing that?
I tell you, where I am now, there's a city council vacant flat, and I was told that the reason it's not filled is because it's delaying Garda vetting. Now, if we can't even vet our own, and if there's a delay, a log back in our own vetting of just people who've been on the list for 10 years, how in the hell are we going to deal with this?
But the problem is, it's been proved time and time again by Grip Media, we're not vetting people coming in from outside Europe into Ireland. We just aren't. We're taking their fingerprints to see if they've presented themselves in another country within the EU. But from a criminal record point of view, we're not vetting anybody.
Yeah, I mean, how could it? I wouldn't think that we could have the possibility of no more than like if you go up to the hospital, you're asked your mother's maiden name.
Yeah, but hang on. I don't know why we can't do things like this, because if I went to America on holidays tomorrow, I have to stand, at immigration Dublin Airport with a guy using biometrics to take a photograph of me and fingerprint me and everything else before I'm allowed through the airport. So I don't know why we can't do proper, checks and balances on people.
But I think a lot of these people is coming in through the back of trucks, and they're coming in through England,
through Northern Ireland. Yeah.
Yeah, and through from France. Like France is not dealing with France is a big country. It could easily deal with all the people that are in Calais. Why are they're ignoring what the problem is?
So you think the problem's going to get worse before it gets better? Yeah.
Yeah, because there's nobody handling it.
Okay, I get that. Sorry, Nuala, I'm short of time and I have to go to everybody if I can. Who would I go to next? Patricia's been waiting the longest. Patricia, hi, how are you doing, Patricia?
Oh, Niall, I wish I was a lot better today, to tell the truth. I'm here in Killarney, so I am, and I thought Paul might touch on the issue, but he didn't.
Okay.
As regards the immigration coming from England, the government knew about that since Christmas time. It was there already, so it was put out by the English government, so they were well aware.
People have been saying it for a year. For the last 2 years, we've been saying it, for God's sake.
Yeah. But the issue that I am actually phoning you about is the video that's gone viral out of Killarney since the weekend with a foreign national in our town. that it's a terrorist attack, there's going to be a bomb.
Oh, I've seen that video, yeah. I don't know who that individual is. It's a horrible video, yeah.
I sent it on to you. I want to know, where's Drew Harris with a statement? Where's our Garda Síochána with a statement? Paul has said that our tourist industry is down 50%. Well, it'll be down 100 now because that's gone viral around the world, such as at this stage. I have an Airbnb. I had cancellations last night. I don't know why, because I were really looking forward to coming to Killarney. I got onto our local radio station. I asked them to put out a statement. There was no response. What's the point, I said, in the doing anything? There was an incident in Dublin with children and a teacher. They said afterwards it was mental health. I don't care what's wrong with this individual.
Okay, we can't talk about that particular case because it's before the courts. Okay.
What I'm saying
the other individual you sent me the message or the video with. Yeah, I mean, that's quite threatening. And by the way, the Garda Síochána should be dealing with a person who makes threatening videos like that.
Niall. They need to come out with a statement that they have this person in custody for the tours, for the local people to reinsure them. And
I want to clarify, I don't know when that video was taken. I don't know if it's only recent or it's years old. I don't know. But I did see the video, and it's quite threatening. It is very threatening.
We need reinsurance in the town of Killarney. Our tourists need reinsurance with that video that's gone on TikTok, and they need to come out and make a statement, Niall, at the end of the day, because there's nothing being vetted. And even the lorry that came in a few weeks back, they don't even know where those people are even gone around the country.
Do you trust the government, Patricia, to deal with the problem that we're going to have going forward? You don't trust them, no?
No.
But Helen McEntee seems very confident she's going to bring in new legislation that would deal with the problem coming from the United Kingdom. She seems confident.
It's not the first time. She said that in January 23 that she would have guards above in Dublin Airport in the bottom of planes checking identification. She done nothing. I had plenty of family and others coming in now to Dublin Airport that time, and I asked them to keep an eye, and there was nothing happening in Dublin Airport. From there on, I have a tour guide. She's there every second day. That's only bull. I don't believe a word out of her mouth, nor this government at this stage. There's no confidence in any of them, and it's time we had an election.
Okay, thank you for that, Patricia. I appreciate you coming on the air talking to us. I need to go to Cahill. Cahill, hi, how are you?
Niall, how are you doing?
Good. You're in Australia, by the way. Yeah.
Yes, in Perth, Australia.
Okay, Cahill, I'm sure you're watching Irish news on a regular basis. You must be quite horrified, by the way, to see some of the scenes that you've seen more recently, particularly over the weekend, or, you know, when you've seen riot police attacking locals and locals involved in protests and large protests yesterday. And it must be something that you're quite alien to.
Yeah, back here 18 months. I lived here before, but the Irish community in Perth are shocked at what's going on at home. It's an absolute scandal what the government are doing to people, forcing young Irish to Australia, and then importing the world. It's completely wrong, and they're talking about building houses and doing this. The Irish people, 40,000 Irish people in Perth, are never ever going to be able to return to Ireland.
But you couldn't afford to return here. That's one thing. You know, and don't get me wrong, I know Australia's not cheap either at the moment, but well, depending on where you're living in Australia, it's not cheap either. But in saying that, you try coming back to Ireland and seeking you afford a house.
Not going to happen. And they're never going to get ahead of the immigration problem now because there's too many people coming in. They're never going to be able to keep the houses built to keep ahead of them. And they're housing immigrants ahead of Irish people, which is totally wrong.
I mean, we've seen in the past Australia have been criticised in the way they deal with immigration. I don't criticise them, but some people criticise them and call it racist. In other words, if you shouldn't be there and you don't have the paperwork and you don't have a passport, you know, you're basically turned around and sent home.
Yeah, you won't walk in here with no passport and get a free house or get taxis around the country or get free meals. You're not entitled to anything unless you're a citizen. No dole, no social welfare, nothing like that. You're entitled to hospital through typical agreements. It's like I'm here a long time, whatever, but it would cost me $14,000 to get staying here originally to get sponsored and get a residency visa. There's nothing for free here, and now Australia are starting to clamp down. They're cutting their student visas, cutting numbers of Irish coming in. Australia is essentially full as well.
Mm-hmm. When you say it's full, obviously they still accept people coming in as long as they're qualified. That old rule of as long as you're qualified to do something an Australian can't do. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Australian community are horrified at what they're seeing, the scenes they're seeing on television. Carl, nice talking to you. Thanks very much indeed, and I wish you the best of luck over in Australia. Let me go to Jessica, who's on a break at the moment, doesn't have much time. Jessica, hi.
Hi, Niall.
How you doing? Jessica, okay, the same question I'm asking everybody. You know, do you trust the government to make the changes, to bring in the legislation to fix all this?
I wouldn't trust them when the goal's set. Never mind what they're doing to us at the moment. like what McEntee saying, like, oh, we're going to bring in this policy. Love, you couldn't even do your homework last week when you were getting questioned. What on earth makes you think you can implement any sort of policy? It's laughable.
Well, I think it's funny that she thinks the British are quite happy to talk to her about it, because if I was British and, the British Home Secretary or Defence Secretary and I was Rishi Sunak, I wouldn't have any interest in talking to the Irish government in relation to this, because it's not their problem. It's not their problem. It's our problem. We have to deal with it. They've already dealt with their problem. They're dealing with it.
I know, it's just laughable. Like, she's there thinking, like, oh, we're going to implement this, that and the other. Like, no, like, it's too late. The damage is done. The horse is bolted out of the gate. Now it's time to clean up the mess. Don't be roping in Rishi and all his help, because he's not. He's going to say no. Good luck to you.
So when you say the horse is bolted, it's time to clean up the mess, right? How do you clean up the mess? I mean, there are thousands of people undocumented in this country. There are thousands of people waiting on the asylum process. There are thousands of people who've already been rejected. And here's one thing we start with. Anybody who's been rejected and has already gone through the appeals process and been rejected again, they need to be sent back to where they came from, or a safe country.
If I was in her shoes, I honest to God would get rid of that whole voluntary thing, because that's the problem.
Imagine handing somebody deportation order and say, sorry about this, but we've rejected you. Here's a deportation order. See you now.
It's like getting your car clamped and then saying, like, look, we'll take off the clamp if you want us to.
Yeah. Could you just pay the fine anyway?
Oh no, but no, we're just in shambles though. Like, I honestly think the country's in a shell of what it used to be. And I'm only 25. Like, I've no hope left, like, for it.
Yeah, I worry about your generation, because your generation are the ones who are going to grow up with this.
Oh, we're royally fucked, and I've no problem saying that. We are, like, we're fucked.
Yeah.
There's no other way of saying it.
Yeah, I mean, it is a bit of a mess at the moment. You don't have the faith in the government to fix the mess. Well, we all know what to do. If you don't have the faith in the government to fix the mess, you change your government. That's the way you fix it. At the ballot box. Don't forget to vote for me, by the way. I'll be running on the 7th of June for a European MEP for Dublin, so please do vote for me. But also, not just me, vote for change. There's lots of good candidates out there, by the way, in the local elections and also in the general election when it comes up at the end of the year. There will be some good candidates out there. Don't be voting for the government. Don't be voting for the already opposition parties like Sinn Féin, the Soc Dems, People for Profit. They've shown us that they're useless. So that's just my word on it. You can vote who you want for, Jessica.
Oh, no, well, you know, I said I'll help you out in any way you can, so you know where I am.
Jessica, thank you very much indeed. We will be in touch, and I will take you up on that offer. Let me go to Louise as well. Louise, hi, how are you doing?
Hi, Niall, how are you?
Good. Louise, nobody today seems to have any faith in the government to deliver when they're basically pretending that they agree with everybody now, saying, this is a mess, this is a crisis, we need to fix it. Do you have faith in them?
No, we're trying desperately to get answers for our own estate at the moment, and it's proving very, very difficult.
Okay. You're living in Newbridge?
Yeah, I live in Newbridge, and we were approached a few weeks ago. We found out that there's a privately owned house in our housing estate that the government are planning to rent to put 12 IPAS applicants into it.
Is it a big house with 12 people in it? Is it a big house?
No, it's not. No, it's a normal 3-bed house that has been extended. So we believe it to have 4 bedrooms. We know the only way that they will get their fire cert is if all applicants are from one family. So the latest update we have is that this is happening, but they're trying to identify one large family within the IPAS network. But our argument is it is against the government policy to go into any house or apartment. So why?
Well, then you're kind of competing with the Irish people then for renting properties, aren't you, when properties are scarce enough?
Well, there's absolutely no competition. Like at the moment, as of today, there is 5 houses available on daft.ie for rent in Newbridge. There was one house within the same estate that was up last week for €1,800 per month for rent. If this landlord gets 12 IPAS applicants into his home, he will receive €76 per person per night. That's €912 per night. That's just under €28,000 per month.
I did say earlier on, there's a lot of people making a lot of money out of immigration in this country.
There is, but I don't think the normal person knows this. I certainly didn't know this until we started looking into it, until it was happening.
But you look at the hotels. I mean, look at the figures we've seen for hotels and the money they're making. You know, I mean,
understand that, yeah.
There was a stage there where I was staying in the Travelodge Hotel because I won't go into it. It was a family matter, family law matter. But I was staying in the Travelodge Hotel, and I was staying getting a good corporate rate. This is going back 2 years ago, and then all of a sudden, listen, I'm sorry, you can't stay here anymore, unless you want to pay 200 and something quid a night or whatever the hell it was, because basically I was in competition with the government.
Yeah,
you know,
and that's the problem. Like the normal taxpayer here is totally priced out of the market. How are they ever going to be able to rent a home? They were not supposed to touch homes in the private rental sector. They're coming in, they're doing that now. They're already depleting an already, very, very small rental market. But then they're paying out nearly 28,000 a month in rent. And the normal taxpayer, how can they compete against that?
No, you can't. Well, you can't compete against it. But look,
no. And what landlord is going to?
And have you gone to your local council or TD in relation to it? By the way,
yes, we have. Yeah, we've sent registered letters to Minister O'Gorman. We've sent it to Darragh O'Brien. We've sent many registered letters. We've had a meeting with a representative from Minister O'Gorman's office, and he basically said to send another letter outlining our concerns again, which we've done. And we've had very little update. The only update we've had is to say it's still happening. We're trying to identify a large family.
Okay. Well, listen, Louise, I wish you well in your endeavours to get that situation sorted out. I mean, I know a lot of people around the country are in a similar situation. And you are right. I don't believe the government should be in competition with the citizens looking for somewhere to rent. It's bad enough trying to find places to rent at the moment.
And we're just asking, people that when the councillors do knock on your doors for your votes, voice your concerns to them, because if this happens here, it's going to happen everywhere.
Thank you very much indeed, Louise. Appreciate you coming on talking to us today. Let me go to James. James, hi, how are you doing?
Afternoon to you, Niall.
Good afternoon. James, I'm listening to the government, suggesting that they're going to be having a meeting with the British. The British don't care. They're happy to get rid of a problem. We're going to see, and I'm looking at this article, the headline says, Rwanda effect potentially setting an asylum time bomb for the Republic.
A couple of things, Niall. As I said, I only just kind of come in late there because I was actually painting in the house today, my day off.
Good man.
A couple of things. I don't know if anyone was mentioned the fact that it was a High Court case, and basically we're told that
you can't send them back to Britain. Yeah,
because they'll be sent on to Rwanda. So, this whole thing is it's nonsense now. And also as well, the meeting has been cancelled because supposedly there was a diary inconsistent where the British Foreign Secretary basically wasn't available. Now, I have to say one thing about Rishi Sunak. I don't like the man, but my God, he's playing the blinder on this one.
Every time he's been asked this question over the last 24 or 48 hours, he's smiling, saying, saying that's our problem, that's Ireland's problem, let them deal with it.
That's Ireland's problem, not mine. You send people here, we will literally, if you ship them here, we'll
send them back.
You ship them here,
absolutely.
And we'll literally keep doing. The only way they could really address the situation is this: now, cut off all benefits, nothing. Come to Ireland, you can sleep in a hole. Give them nothing. Because look what happened when they decided
but you can't. See, here's the problem, James. I'm kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, right? Those who deserve to be here, and there are people genuinely fleeing war. There are people genuinely who should be asylum seekers. And because we do have a responsibility to some people. But the vast majority coming into this country are chancing their arm. And we know that.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay.
Absolutely.
But do we really want to see a situation like Mount Street all over the city where people are living in tents? They need to be just processed really quickly. I mean, I'm talking like 48, 72 hours. Who are you? Find out exactly who they are. Do you deserve to stay? Do you have a case that should actually go forward even to an application? If not, if you're some chancer, I'm sorry, back on the plane, back on the boat, you go back to where you came from. You're not our responsibility.
Yeah, the problem though is, Niall, the problem is you have NGOs who are state funded, ironically.
I would defund these NGOs. I would defund all of these NGOs.
No more money.
By the way, can I say, there's 36,000 NGOs in this country, which cost nearly $7 billion. There's a lot of good NGOs in the country, right?
Oh, there are.
Yeah, but the NGOs that are not serving our purposes, or certainly they have skin in the game, so to speak, those NGOs, I would defund them all tomorrow. If they want to fundraise, they can.
Yeah, exactly. So you simply say to all these NGOs, I say, we're giving you no more money, and if all the refugees want to fund the Refugee Council, let the refugees who are living here fund the Refugee Council. Let them do that. Let them sort out their own. So, and I can guarantee you one thing, if you cut off the funding, there's going to be no barristers or senior counsels who are going to work on tick. for the Irish Refugee Council if they're not going to get paid. Because
I'm not naming specific NGOs, but we all know that there are a lot of them. There are a lot, but they're not the only ones. There's a lot of them out there that represent people seeking international protection, asylum seekers, and everything else. And they should all be self-funded. If they want to represent people, fair play to them, well done to them. But I mean, the idea that we're funding an organisation, which are organisations around the country, which are probably causing us more problems than anything else, it just seems bizarre.
Exactly. You know what I mean? It's like, it'd be like someone moving into your home and you're paying the mortgage for them and you going out and sleeping in your car.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what's like. No, the thing about Niall is, we have to say enough is enough. Simple as it is. And the law is already there. If you present yourself without identification, they can arrest you and deport you straight away. Or what you simply do is, Portlaoise prison, Niall, is half empty. Put them into Portlaoise prison, bring them down and say, lads, this is it. Where are you from? I'm not telling you, grand. We're going to stick you in an 8x10 cell. You stay there until you tell us. Simple as. We'll give you 3 squares a day, and that's it. If you don't want to tell us, you stay behind bars until you do.
Well, the law states quite clearly in this country, if you enter the country with no documentation, it is a criminal offence. Now, very few people, by the way, have been prosecuted with that crime. 1 or 2 more recently, by the way.
1 or 2 or something.
Yeah, more recently. There has been 1 or 2 recently. I think the government are trying to prove a point that they are actually doing it. Because Michael McNamara raised it in the Dáil that nobody was being prosecuted, and he wanted to know who was the one that gave the orders not to prosecute people, because that's Irish immigration law. We have to stand by it. Stay there for a second, Albert, because I want to go to Stephen. Stay there, James, too. Stephen, hi, how are you? Now, Stephen O'Rourke is an MEP for Dublin, a candidate for Dublin. Stephen, hi, how are you?
Niall, how are you? Great,
Good.
Cheers for having me on.
Yeah, best of luck. May the best man win. I'll meet you in a boxing ring and we'll have it out afterwards.
Yeah, sure. I'm still waiting for that one-on-one match on O'Connell Street, but you haven't got back to me yet.
Oh, I don't remember that, Stephen. Was it? I don't remember. I swear to God, I talk to so many people, Stephen. I swear to God, I just forget who everybody is. Stephen, the Irish legislation, the government are suggesting they're going to change legislation to stop this, what they're calling tsunami or Rwanda effect of asylum seekers time bomb for the Republic of Ireland over the next 6 weeks. Do you think they're going to do anything to stop this happening?
Well, Niall, first I'd like to say, like you said to me, best of luck to you too in the election. But I think we need to get to the bottom of the issue, which is to fix the laws and to have somebody, a sensible voice in Europe who can help, because that's where the legislation is coming from. And I must say, and I don't mean this in any way as an attack on you or anyone, but I think the type of language that you're using is kind of dividing people.
Okay, what's the language? Give me an example. Give me an example of the language I'm using to divide people. Go on.
Divisive. You're using the words that are printed that are in the media.
No, I'm asking you to give me an example of the language I've used today that's divisive.
You're saying that's a ticking time bomb, and you're.
I know. I just said to you. There's an article in the paper that says Rwanda effect potentially setting an asylum time bomb for the Republic of Ireland. Do you want me to pretend the headlines don't exist? Is that what you want me to do, Stephen?
No. See, this is what you're doing. You're putting words in my mouth. I'm saying that we need somebody who can bring the people together and not divide people. When I tell you, Stephen, the best people in the world for dividing people are our own government. When we have an immigration policy, an immigration law in this country, and they don't even implement it, and they have rural towns all over Ireland with people, parents, mothers, fathers, children unhappy because they feel that there's not enough services to deal with the problem. I completely agree. Niall, if you let me speak, I completely agree with that. And what we need to rise above that. We need to get somebody who has a sensible voice, who actually understands the laws like myself. I'm a scientist who works in regulatory affairs. I know how to read these laws inside out. I know how to communicate them to the ordinary average people like ourselves, like everyone. And that's what we need. We need somebody going to Europe who will be able to communicate and renegotiate this pact.
Okay, so tell me how we do that. Okay, so tell me.
This is how we do it now.
No, you're not. You're telling me, and I agree with you, by the way. That's why I want to go to Europe as well, because I want to fix this for people. I want to be the voice of people. But tell me how, in Ireland right now, the situation that we have, forget about Europe just for the moment, right? Because the EU Migration Pact has already been signed, as you well know, by the MEPs we had over there. So how are we going to fix the situation? Forget about the pact, because it doesn't come in until probably 2026 anyway. How do we fix the problem we have right now, where we have thousands of people in Mount Street in tents and being treated in an inhumane way, who probably shouldn't be here, most of them anyway. We have people living in hotel rooms, people living in dog boxes all over the country, essentially. How do we fix that problem right now?
We fix it now by applying the law. And the simple fact is the law as it is in Ireland and Europe is not being applied right now. So we need to find people, sensible people, who can come together and fix that.
Okay, so are you suggesting, Stephen, as I'm suggesting, you just don't like my language, are you suggesting that those who are not entitled to be asylum seekers should be processed quicker, which is the vast majority of people, by the way, coming into the country? They do predict that most people who come in and apply for asylum actually don't qualify. Are you suggesting they just be deported?
I'm suggesting that something needs to be put in place. I'm not suggesting... Okay. Wait a second. I'm not suggesting a task force because we know that the current government are useless when it comes to stuff like that.
But should people be deported, Stephen? Should people be deported?
They should be. They should be processed. They should be properly processed. And if it's not a correct asylum approach, if they're here illegally, then steps need to be taken to take care of that.
Okay, and deported.
It's a controversial issue.
Okay, but does that mean deported?
Well, what do you think it means?
I mean, I believe it means deported. Yes, people need to be deported.
You can't just grab people by the scruff of the neck and put them on a plane. You need to make
sure... That's the language you're using. I never use scruff of the neck. There is a process, obviously.
I know, I didn't say you did, but the point is there needs to be steps taken to this. You can't just have reactionary people saying, oh yeah, put them all on a plane. How are you going to do that? That's going to get you votes, Niall, but it's not sorting out the issue.
Well, it is sorting out the issue at the moment in this country because that's what people want. The people of this country have decided, and we've seen it poll after poll, Red Sea, Amorok, that the majority of people in this country believe we are letting way too many people in too quickly.
And I agree with that. And I agree that these deportations need to happen. But what's your suggestion? How are you going to implement that?
Well, how do you do it apart from having some sort of task force of some situation? I'm not suggesting like ICE in America who go around, kind of raiding homes or anything like that. But they do have task force in Britain. They have task force actually in most countries when it comes to immigration.
Well,
it's quite common.
I can tell you exactly what our current Irish government could be doing is they could be applying the law. So the law is there. The law is clear for everyone to see. But for some reason, the government is not putting it into application. So that's the question. That's what people need to be asking themselves. And I would honestly think the answer to this is if everyone... And I mean this seriously, if everyone in Dublin, for example, said tomorrow, okay, I'm not going to work, there needs to be an issue here, I'm putting tools down. And if you did it yourself, Niall, don't go into your podcast tomorrow, I imagine there'd be a massive change.
Oh, there would be. But, okay, so you're saying you're not in favour. See, I'm confused even by the fact that you're saying you're agreeing with me that we need to have a process that works. We need to have laws that are implemented, and we have legislation, very robust legislation in this country when it comes to immigration. But as we're saying, when it's not being implemented, I don't know who gave those orders not to implement it. So how do you implement those laws without having some sort of task force? Because the idea of voluntarily handing somebody a deportation order and saying, listen, you failed the asylum process, I'll see you now, that's not happening. What's happening is those people are not leaving the country, and then they're applying back to the Minister for Justice for permission to remain, which she's granting them. So that process is not happening at the moment. So how do you make that process happen?
Exactly, that's the question. Everyone should be asking, why is Helen McEntee and why are the other TDs, why are they not doing anything about it? I think if we figure that out, then we'll have answers to everything.
But they won't do it because there's objections there by NGOs. We've seen that on numerous occasions to treat people respectfully and humanely. And there's a balance of treating people respectfully and humanely and getting the job done. Because unfortunately, there are times where you have to forcefully do a job. And that job is that if people are living here illegally or people are illegally in the country, that they must be removed.
But this comes back to what we discussed at the beginning. This is a European issue. And this is why we need a sensible voice to go to
You can't keep saying that to me all the time. I mean, that's a good line, and I like the line. I'll use it myself. But you can't keep saying that all the time. That's not going to solve the problem we have right now, because unfortunately, the MEPs we had before us went and voted for it.
Where did this issue come from? This issue that we're facing now is coming from Europe.
I'm well aware of that.
Are you denying that?
No, I'm not denying that. But it also comes from here as well, because our own government are not dealing with the legislation we currently have.
So what's your solution then?
There's no legal reason why we can't remove people from the country. The only reason we don't do it is because there's so much pressure put on the government by NGOs. We've seen that time and time again.
So if you get to Europe, how are you going to change that?
I'm going to change it because when I get to Europe, I'm going to make sure that going forward, the EU Migration Pact, as you well know, will change on a regular basis. So will our obligations and as to how many people we have to take in. I will first, by the way, beg the government not to sign the EU Migration Pact. And I would challenge everybody to go out and talk to their local TD and make sure they don't get involved in or sign it. It shouldn't be there in the first place. Like Denmark, we should opt out of it completely.
And if you get to Europe, like me, if I get to Europe, I've already made it clear I'm not going to join a group, because any TD or any MEP, who joins a Euro group, they always vote along the party line. So I've made it very clear that if I go to Europe, I'm an independent.
No, obviously, as you know, I'm not an independent. I'm with Independent Ireland, a political party, and we have our own group of policies. So I won't be joining a group, no.
Yeah, same as myself.
Okay.
I think that's what we need to get away from parties.
Stephen, listen, thank you very much indeed, and I appreciate you coming on the air and talking to us today. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, Stephen. All right. Best of luck.
For Europe.eu.
Oh, yeah.
Good luck.
Good luck to you. Bye. See, that shows you how fair I am, doesn't it? Let me just go to Albert. I couldn't be dealing much more of that. Albert, you're on Ireland's Classic. Oh, you're not. No, you're on the Niall Boylan podcast. How you doing, Albert?
Hi, Niall.
I get confused now.
Stephen reminds me of the present government. They know all the rules and regulations, but don't really want to enforce them anyway.
Yeah, by the way, people should go to niallboylanforeurope.ie. Can I point out? What I'm always trying to find out is, people say, oh yeah, I agree with you, Niall, or I agree, yeah, we should be implementing the law. But no, we don't need a task force. But of course we need it. There's no other way of dealing with it. There's no other way of dealing with it.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, you have to be cruel to be kind sometimes. That's just the way it is. And we are a country. We do have a responsibility to our people. We do have a responsibility to our borders. He kept talking about the EU. Unfortunately, we had wasters over there over the last God knows how many years who voted for the EU Migration Pact. And now we're in that situation. So we just have to hope that the government actually don't vote for it. And that's up to everybody to get onto the local TDs. Not a lot I can do about that. But if they do vote for it, and they will, Albert, you can be sure, I'll be over in Europe to make sure that our obligations don't change under that pact.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what we need here is some deterrent. We need to have 3 months of when we go really heavy-handed with migrants and deport them and do whatever we need to do and get a message out there to all the other countries that we won't stand for it. Because this is the problem, is that we are just an easy touch.
We're not even allowed to talk. I mean, you heard Stephen there. He's running as an MEP, and he's giving out about my language because I turned around and said there was going to be the Rwanda for potentially setting an asylum time bomb for the Republic. He says I shouldn't be saying things like that. That's because some people are just too woke to listen to the truth.
Yeah. But you know as well as I do that, like I'd say 85% of them coming over are they're not proper immigrants, or they're not being displaced or anything else.
No, they don't qualify. They don't qualify. Yes, they're economic migrants.
Economic migrants. Yeah, but I mean, I would not be surprised now at the moment if when they're coming off the boat in Dover that they're being given 2 options, and the guys over there are saying, "Here you go. There's a good possibility you're going to go to Rwanda, or here's a ticket to the ferry to Northern Ireland and go down to the Republic. They'll look after you." I would not be surprised if that's happening. Mm-hmm. Because they arrive in the UK without a pot to piss in. So where do they get the money to come over to Ireland and the train down or the bus down or wherever it is? They've been given the money to do it.
Well, I'm sure Rishi Sunak is so delighted at the moment that if we send them back to the UK, he'll give them a plane ticket or a ferry ticket. Yeah. Just go on back over to Ireland there. They look after you. You'll be grand. You know what I mean?
But I mean, the other problem is how do we now get them on a boat and send them back to the UK? We're going to go and do this. It's like, I mean, I know Stephen mentioned get them by the scruff of the neck. Are they going to be kicking and screaming onto the boat, or kicking and screaming onto?
I don't know what Stephen was talking about. Nobody mentioned grabbing people by the scruff of the neck.
No.
It's always that's language, by the way, as well, that I would say you shouldn't be using, because that's probably not going to happen. I mean, you basically just take people, and look, if you have to arrest somebody and put handcuffs on them, because they're not willing, to cooperate and go on Garda Síochána to be taken to whatever centre it needs to be prepared for deportation, well, then so be it. That's just the way it has to be. That's the law.
But that's my point, is these people are not going to willingly get onto the ferry and go back to the UK.
No, they're not.
They're not.
No.
They're going to have to be forcibly put on it. And I mean, I don't know how that's going to work out.
And they're not going to be sent back to Northern Ireland. I can tell you now, the people in Northern Ireland wouldn't put up with that shite.
Yeah, if it was Irish people, the guards would be bloody kicking the hell out of them. If it's foreign nationals, they don't want bad press. They won't be touching them. Don't believe me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, he is right, by the way, Stephen, about one thing. A lot of this stems from Europe. It stems from what we are and aren't allowed to do, and our obligations to the EU when it comes to migrants. Like Denmark, we could have opted out of the EU Migration Pact, but unfortunately we had a bunch of woke MEPs who voted for it. A bunch of MEPs who don't believe we probably should have a task force. It's a task force similar to what Stephen was suggesting, that we shouldn't have a task force. But that's not what I suggested, by the way.
Sorry, Niall. You know something? When we're pointing at the EU, we're 3 fingers pointing back at us. We're not doing our job over here. Our government, our civil service, our immigration, they're not doing their jobs. That's the problem. It's not.
But by the way, but we're quite entitled to do our job in this country. We're quite entitled to enforce our own laws. He is right. The fact that 75% or over 75% of our legislation comes from directives from the European Union and from Brussels, and we all know we're in control by Brussels. But for God's sake, we can't lose any more of our control of our laws to Brussels. We just don't need that. We need this idea, by the way, that the word sovereignty or protecting our borders are some sort of dirty words. Absolute and utter nonsense. We have an obligation to the Irish people to do those things and protect our sovereignty.
Yeah, look, I have to be honest. I mean, and I don't know whether the government realise this, but they're going down. We are now entering a very dark tunnel on this, because the more of these people that come over, the more people are going to get agitated. The more on the streets this is going to happen. This will end up being riots on the streets.
Okay, well, listen, thank you very much. And Albert, I hope that doesn't happen. And I always say to people...
So do I.
And by the way, can I just say, because somebody asked me yesterday about protests, I support all of the protests, every single one of them. And I support all of the people who are out protesting. And well done to you, because that's what democracy, true democracy, is about. But I always say to people, keep it peaceful.
Yeah,
and don't lower yourself to any level of anybody who gets involved in violence. And by the way, can I also say as well to members of Garda Síochána, and I spoke to many of them there yesterday, by the way, outside Croke Park while I was campaigning. Can I say to members of Garda Síochána, remember, of course, you have daughters, sons, mothers, fathers. They're just Irish citizens, by the way. So please deal with it in the way that you believe you should deal with it. If people are not being violent towards you, don't be violent towards them. Because I don't want to see scenes like you. I don't want to see those scenes that happen in Newtown, Mount Kennedy. That was despicable.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, but
it's like a police state.
But you can see what's going to happen is, I mean, the guards are tooling up with all their stuff. The citizens are going to start doing the same, because they're not just going to stand by. But it will happen. And whether it happens to a small minority who decide, well, we're out here to do this, or the actual citizens get fed up being bashed around, you're going to see this.
Yeah, well, I urge people not to go down that road. We can deal with this. The best way to deal with this, and I keep saying it's getting really close now. It's only 5 weeks away, which is the next elections, the local elections. Make sure you get the government out of the councils first. That's the first thing we can do. So if you take all the Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, the Greens, Sinn Féin, People for Profit, Soc Dems, get them all out. Vote for your local independents who you believe will do a good job. Get them all in. And then when it comes to the general, and the same goes for the European Union, by the way, as well. Vote for me, obviously. Give me your number one vote in Dublin.
If you don't change what's happening at the moment, you don't change the government now, you don't have any right to complain.
Well, here's the thing. This is one shot. We're getting one shot at it this year. Yeah. Right? And otherwise, there's 5 more years of this. And it will be a disaster in 5 years. So we've got one shot at it. We've got a general election coming up, most likely in November, I imagine. In November. And that's our opportunity as well. So we've got the locals, we've got the EUs, and then we've got the general election. This is our opportunity to get rid of them all and change everything. We need to change everything.
Yeah.
Thank you, Albert.
Thanks, Niall.
All right, let me go to Morris very finally. Morris, just finally before we finish up here today. Hi, how are you, Morris?
Good, thanks, Niall.
Good.
I just wanted to say that it's very important in relation to the general election coming up. Like, this is make or break. What people don't realise is that, we see with the local elections, for instance, there's people who've been only here for less than a year who are now running in the council. What will it be? What will it look like in another 5 years, for instance? These people then will possibly have passports. These people then will be able to vote in the general election. These people then will probably vote for the parties that gave them that passport. So, people have to realise that this is make or break. It's the people, for instance, who are saying, giving out about the government. A lot of these people, unfortunately, they're not the ones who are inclined to get up in the morning and vote on voting day. And it's up to everyone. Like when we saw in relation to the Brexit vote in 2016, a lot of people were inspired by a lot of people, including Nigel Farage, to get up and for once in their lives vote, to get out and to make a difference. And it did. And if those people didn't do what they did, like the people like David Cameron would have got their way. What people don't realise is that the costs of all of this, like people, for instance, if they're in the country for 10 years, they get a full pension, whereas it takes the likes of you or me 40 years to qualify for a full pension. Like all the costs associated, who's going to pay for it? It's going to be increase in taxes, and it's going to be a cut in the pension, and also the pension age will increase to possibly 75, and that's not being talked about. I remember Alexander Gauland, the Alternative for Deutschland, back in 2018, he was saying in the Bundestag that 1 million Syrian refugees were costing that at that time 60,000 euros per head. And he said that that was the figures from one of their own relevant departments there, and down into, let's say, housing them, feeding them, educating them, and also in relation to teaching them the German language. And at the same time, the average German wage was about 28,000 euros. So they were costing the equivalent of 12 million Germans. Like, that's not sustainable. And like, people aren't being told how much this is going to cost. People are constantly told, oh, immigration is great, they pay taxes, whatever. A certain amount do, but like, a lot of the people we're seeing, they're not going to be paying taxes. Like, for instance, the guy who stabbed the children never paid taxes in his life, and he got Irish citizenship.
Yeah.
Like, what we have to discuss is in relation to how people get citizenship. What are the criteria to get that? Like, for instance, it used to be 10 years. Now it's 4 or 5 years. It should be up to 20 years. And in those years, you shouldn't be entitled to social housing or any of the social services that citizens or people who pay taxes are entitled to.
No, and I find it quite bizarre, by the way, and I only mentioned this a while ago to Sharon Keoghan, but she didn't agree with me, mind you. I found it bizarre that in the local elections, you don't even have to have an Irish passport. Actually, if you're an asylum seeker, you can vote in a local election. And I find that really bizarre. Why would anybody have a right to vote on something that can make a change to people's lives over a 5-year period if you're not even from the country, or there's a possibility you mightn't even be staying here because you might not, have a successful application? Or even if you're Ukrainian and you're here for a short period of time, hopefully because the war won't last that long, why would you allow people to vote? I don't understand that. Maybe that's just me. I don't get it. I know they're not allowed to vote in the European elections or the general elections, as far as I know. But even in the local elections, I don't get it.
I find it's an insult to people who fought and died to win the right to vote and to win the sovereignty back of this country. Like, when people talk about 1916, when you hear about Sinn Féin, for instance, like, they basically spat in the faces of the graves of those people who fought and died for this country, and people before and after them. We're losing an integral part of our sovereignty in relation to controlling migration and how that will influence the demographics of the country going forward.
We're losing your line there a little bit, Morrissey. But no, I get the point you're making, Morris. And listen, thank you very much indeed for contributing today. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who got involved in the show. Thank you to everybody, by the way, who's been so kind to me over the last few days. And can I say a special thank you, by the way, to all my opponents who are running in Dublin, and all the political parties who are my opponents, because they've done me so many favours over the weekend, particularly. All the stuff that they put up, all the nasty shite they want to put up about me, you really do me a favour, because you're getting my name out there, so much so that when it comes to the betting, I'm now gone up into the top 3. 4, I think. I'm 3 or 4, I'm not too sure. So thank you very much indeed. I really, really appreciate all the publicity you're giving me, to all my opposition. Thank you for all the publicity you give me. It's been wonderful. Don't forget, by the way, please vote for me. I promise I will be the voice. And somebody said to me, Niall, what's the first thing you're going to promise? And I've said this time and time again, the first thing I want to promise to people, if I am elected, is that I want to be there for you. I don't want to disappear for 5 years and arrive back in 4.5 years' time, cutting, ribbons to open supermarkets and all stupid stuff like that just to get your vote again, and be disappeared for the other 4.5 years. That's not what I want to do. I want to be there all the time. I want to be visible. So I will continue to do this podcast. And I can do that. There's no law says I can't. I will continue to do this podcast. I'll probably have to change the schedule a little bit around, obviously, because I won't be here as much, and it'll be harder for me because I'll be working a lot, quite hard, obviously. But mind you, I've always had 2 jobs. If you remember, of course, I had the radio job too. So I'll continue doing this podcast. I'll continue to have you on the air. I'll tell you every single week what I've done the week before. I will report back and say, look, I was at this debate, plenary, whatever. This particular week, we were talking about this. We were debating this policy, this directive, this proposal, this amendment to law, whatever it happens to be. I will tell you. And I'll say to you, listen, this is what I'm thinking on it. What do you think? And I'll take your input, the people who voted for me, because that's what I'm there for. I'm not there for me. So you have to understand that when you're a European MEP, or indeed a politician, it's public representation. You're not there for yourself. Leo Varadkar, Helen McEntee, Simon Harris, Niall, they shouldn't be there to implement laws that they believe are a good idea. They should be there to implement laws that you believe are a good idea, because they have a mandate from you. And I will have a mandate from you. So when I go over there and the majority of you tell me, we don't think it's a good idea enough for you to sign that, I won't sign it. No matter what I think of it, I won't sign it. Because I'm there for you. I want to be your voice. Although I see one or two people robbing me line now. I want to be the real voice. Because remember, I am the real voice. I'm the one that's been on the radio for the last 30 years, not the rest of them. When I talked to Paul Trevaux earlier on, I want to be there to represent small business as well. Because I've had my own business. I've employed people in the past. I'm probably one of the only MEPs out there who's actually employed people and know how small business works. I've been through it all. I've had a divorce. I've been in the radio for 30 years, listened to 250,000 callers in that time with all myriad of problems. I know what people think. I listen. Unlike the government and unlike the other candidates that are currently running for Europe who don't listen. We've seen that in the past. We've seen every single candidate for Europe in the past go over there and vote for stuff that you didn't want. I won't be one of those. I want to be your voice. So please, I implore you, on the 7th of June when you're out there voting, please vote for me. All right? And I promise you I won't let you down. Some of the comments, by the way, coming in today regarding hospitality industry. Somebody says, regarding staycations, Irish hotels, pubs and restaurants have simply got too expensive for people. More often than not, this is greed. Not ignoring the fact that filling towns and villages with welfare migrants who spend no money on local services has decimated the tourism industry. Marcus, I agree with you completely. I think less than not, it's probably greed, to be honest with you. With the hotels, I think there's a bit of greed going on because obviously they're making money out of migrants. But I think when it comes to the small restaurants, it's a case of their costs have gone up so much that they unfortunately have to charge more. Rob says Ireland should be like Australia when it comes to anyone coming into the country. Easy checks and passports. We need people coming into the country for work, but what we don't need is people coming here illegally as economic tourists. I could go on here, a lot more to say. Aaron said Simon Harris is very happy with Ireland's open border policy. Sure, let everyone in and it'll be grand. James Cleverly is very clever. Yeah, James Cleverly is very clever in the UK. He just does not want to deal with it at all. Thank you to everybody, by the way, who got involved in the show today. Please, 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 can I ask you as well? Remember, the podcast doesn't run on fresh air. We don't get paid for doing this podcast. And it's really important that we give you this opportunity. People say to me, Niall, are you going to protests and all that? I'm busy here, by the way, giving you this opportunity. This is your protest as well, to getting your voice out there. I've been doing this for 30 years. Before any of them had nappies on them, I've been giving people the opportunity to protest. And that opportunity has been on the radio or on my podcast. And I give that time to people to do that. And we have changed so much over 30 years with the opportunities that we've given people on radio and here. Unfortunately, I can't be on radio while I'm running for election at the moment. So I've had to give up my career of 30 years. So I'm willing to put my career on the line for you. So please help me. And help me get through this podcast too, by the way. We make no money out of it. We honestly don't. We have to pay the cost. We get some subscriptions on our website, niallboylan.com. So it's niallboylan.com. So if you can donate or you can subscribe on the website to the podcast, please, please do that. It'll make such a difference to us paying the bills at the end of this month. Thank you very much indeed. Don't forget, if you want more information, by the way, in relation to my campaign, election campaign, you can go, as usual, to the website, Niall Boylan for Europe. That's niallboylanforeurope.ie. And you can fill out a form there, by the way, if you want to help, you want to give out leaflets in your area, whatever it happens to be. Let us know. niallboylanforeurope.ie. Before we finish up, should we play the video again there? My good producer person. Yeah, sure, why not? He's going to play this. Have a great day. Thank you very much indeed. And I shall talk to you again tomorrow at the same time. Until then, have a great day. Hi, my name is Niall Boylan. Of course, you know me from the radio station. I'm talking to people every single day. And you know what? They're sick of the government. I love this city. I love Ireland. I love the crack. I love the cave meal of Fáilte that it's offered us for thousands of years. But we need change. And over the last 4 years in particular, I've noticed those callers are getting angrier and very frustrated because they feel voiceless. They're listening to a government who are not listening to them. An opposition party who don't seem to oppose. They've ignored us on so many things, so many important issues. They've ignored us on mass immigration with a reckless immigration policy. They've ignored us on healthcare with waiting lists getting longer. There's 4,000 children in temporary accommodation as the homeless numbers rise and rise in this country. But what have they done about it? What have they actually done? They've made promises but done nothing. Our business communities are suffering with closures every single day caused by skyrocketing energy costs and a government that refuses to reduce the VAT rate back to 9% to help those businesses stay open. And many people say they don't feel safe in our city. with crime figures that seem to be getting worse every single day. And that's why I'm here. You can see the doll in the background. And remember, in that building, in the doll in the background, very few of those people are actually listening to you. But some people are listening. Michael Collins, Michael Fitzmaurice, and Richard O'Donoghue, Independent Ireland. And that's why I've decided to run as a European MEP and be the real voice of Dublin for Independent Ireland, for honesty, integrity, and real common sense. I'm not a politician. In fact, I'm not even part of the establishment. But I think that's what we really need. We need real change. And we need people to stand up and be counted and represent the people of Dublin. I'm a proud Dubliner. I'm a proud Irishman. I'm a good listener. And I'll speak honestly and openly for you, the people of Dublin and the people of Ireland. So please vote for me, Niall Boylan, on the 7th of June, and I'll be the real voice of Dublin and the real voice of Ireland in Europe.
The multi-award-winning Niall Boylan Podcast. Listen live on Facebook, YouTube, and all the usual live stream services. To get in touch, just WhatsApp or text 085 100 2255. The Niall Boylan Podcast. They told me to shut up. Available for download from all your usual platforms.